In my 20s, I swore to myself that I would never ever do this job, even if I was paid heftily. But then I found myself in Malta at 30 years old, having quit my good corporate job and then having very few desirable options for employment in Malta. And trust me, if the thought of public speaking or just being the center of attention makes your palms sweat like it does mine, then you're going to relate to my story. Back then in 2013, there was almost nothing really for any foreigner. There were almost very, very few jobs for foreigners because, of course, it was a small island. It was just developing at the time. And the rules that were set in place didn't make space for foreigners, whether you were from other EU countries, European countries, or third country nationals, as every other country is labeled. So when I first moved to Malta, everything was really exciting. But there was this thought of rebirth and adventure that I had in me, was boiling up in me. And I had no idea that my confidence was going to take a huge hit and how much I was going to learn about myself, especially in this job. And that job is teaching English as a second language. I thought I was really confident before. I thought I knew who I was before, but I had no idea that I would be suffering from imposter syndrome. But then this job helped me overcome that, and that's what I'm going to be explaining in this video. I hope that you find something to relate to, and if you do, please let me know your stories in the comments below, and give this video a big like, because that really helps push it out there, so that more people who might be interested in this topic will get to see it. Growing up in Nigeria, Nigerian parents, African parents in general, only consider certain jobs as worthwhile. Doctor, lawyer, engineer, politician. Okay, politics is also one of the good ones. By the way, if you're Nigerian and I missed anything from this list, please let me know. Okay, but if you weren't in any of these professions, then people wouldn't take you very seriously. And teaching is one of the least desirable jobs in Nigeria. I think in many countries in the world, but most especially in Africa, because of course it's not well paid, but the education system itself is not only terribly organized, it's also horribly against teachers. It doesn't take care of its teachers at all. You know, the pay is so minimal. So no one really grows up thinking, I want to be a teacher. And I was one of those people. I was like, no, I would never, ever teach. Also, I didn't consider myself to be the kind of person that could stand in front of a crowd. Even if that crowd was a bunch of kids, you know, I didn't imagine that adult education was even a thing, you know, was even a possibility. So I just couldn't imagine myself in front of a group of people delivering a lecture or whatever. I didn't think I was made for that. You know, my confidence was in a different spectrum, in a different way, in a different aspect of life, and not in public speaking. So public speaking was not my thing. Teaching was not in the radar. And I found myself in Malta doing that. How did I get here? So this is my origin story. When I moved to Malta, there was nothing for me, like I said before. So I went through 6 months. Of doing absolutely nothing, having this internal struggle with myself because I just quit a very professional job. I had 2 university degrees at this time, and I just couldn't see myself doing anything less. When most people move out of Africa, it's either they're moving to study abroad and then they'll come back to Africa to work, or they're moving for economic reasons, because as we know, the economic situation is really unstable in Africa, especially in Nigeria, where more than half of the population lives under the poverty line, at least according to Western standards. You know, that's another story, another video for another time. I have my opinions on that. But anyway, according to Western standards, more than 50% of Africans, sub-Saharan Africans, are living below the poverty line. And so most people live for economic reasons. So even though they might hold really high degrees, when they leave, they will take anything they get. In my case, I've been really fortunate because I had the support of my husband. So I didn't have to go through that desperate era of just doing anything that comes my way. So I spent 6 months doing nothing, 6 months having no friends, 6 months struggling with my identity because I tried to fit into the culture that I found here. I thought that, I had moved so much growing up in my life in Nigeria that I thought, okay, moving to another country is not going to be a big deal. I just have to observe the culture, observe the people, try to blend in, because again, I don't want to be center of attention. So things like going to the beach and wearing a bikini, that was a huge culture shock for me, because back in Nigeria, you would go to the beach fully clothed, So I had to try. And the fact that there weren't many people who looked like me back then, now it's different, but there weren't many people who looked like me at the beach, in their bikinis, that made me kind of the center of attention. And I didn't want that. So going to the beach wasn't exactly a fun experience. And there were other culture shocks that I had to struggle my way through. In my bid to try to fit in, I started realizing something about myself. And that was that I was afraid to show who I really was. I started shrinking because I had this huge sense of imposter syndrome. At the time, I didn't know what it was called. I couldn't have put a name to it, but I just felt like I didn't belong, or that I didn't deserve to be doing the things that I was doing. So here's how I got into teaching. According to the Maltese employment law, an employer has to demonstrate that they attempted to recruit locals first, then other European nationals before any other country. So it had nothing to do with being from Africa or anything else. Even if you were from the United States or from Canada, you were also treated as what is called a third country national. At the time, there were fewer jobs, fewer options, fewer varieties than there are now available, especially in my field. I have a degree in geology and mathematics and economics. So geology, one, and then mathematics and economics is another. And at the time, I'd applied to so many companies within my field. Geology, you can forget about it. That's almost non-existent here in Malta. So in a line of accounting, logistics, even bookkeeping, and I didn't get any responses back, not even a no, except for one. And this person explained to me why they couldn't employ me, which is what I've explained earlier. And so, of course, that meant that I was really, really depressed. And I was at a point where I was thinking, is it worth it for me coming here? Should I move back home? How can I save my relationship if I decided to move back home? Now, here's what happened. One day at a cafe, I was sitting with my cup of coffee, reading the newspaper. Yes, those were a thing back then. There was still a thing back then. So I was reading a newspaper, and this ad popped up, and it was for a course for teacher training, English teacher training course. And it was intriguing because I hadn't seen anything that excited me up until that moment. So it was either working in the tourism industry, in a hotel or in a restaurant, which was just out of it for me. I mean, it's not to sound proud or anything, but at least I wanted to give myself the chance to actually find something that I would enjoy, something that I liked, especially since I had the opportunity to do so. I had a fortunate opportunity to do so. So I didn't just want to settle for anything. So I saw this and I was like, hey, why not? I like English. I've always done very well in all of my English exams in the past. I've always had high scores in English. And so I decided, okay, I'm just going to give it a shot. And if it works out, fine. If it doesn't, no. Up until this moment, I had no idea of teaching English, what it entailed teaching English as a second language. I had no clue. I had never heard of ELT, ELS, and all of the things I was going to learn eventually regarding this industry. I had no clue that this industry even existed. And so I spoke with my husband, we agreed, and I decided to take a course. And I fell in love. I loved how it challenged the mind, because the idea of education I had, the idea of teaching I had coming from Nigeria, is this very authoritarian way of teaching. You have the teacher in front of the class doing most of the talking 99% of the time, or they just put things on the board, notes on the board, and the students had to copy, go home, read, write an exam, and that was it. So it wasn't a job that I considered exciting until I took the course, the teacher training course. I took the teacher training course. I did the local exams. If you want to know more about teaching English as a second language, not necessarily in Malta or even in Malta, you can put that in the comment and I might make a video about that. But this video is not about teaching English. It's about how the job itself helped me stop shrinking. So I took the course. Everything went well. I think I was one of the best students. I usually shine in that environment where I have to study and show off what I've studied. So that's where I usually shine. But then when it came to the final practice tests, where I had to then stand in front of my colleagues, these are people that we've been in the class for weeks together, we've been communicating, we've been interacting, we've been bouncing off ideas off of each other, and then it came the moment to teach them. Oh my God. In my head, it was a disaster. I don't know. I don't know what I did. I can't, right now, I can't tell you anything that I did. I can only tell you what I taught, but how I did it, if I followed the techniques that I was taught, I have no clue. But apparently I did well because I passed the test, but I still didn't feel like I did a good job. I still felt like I didn't belong there. And the reasons behind that was, of course, I was the only Black person. I was the only Nigerian. I think I was also the only foreigner. Yeah, I was the only foreigner in my class. We were a group of, I think, 10. And I was the only foreigner there. The only one with a very different accent. And I just felt like I didn't belong. I felt this sense that I was a fraud, this sense that I was pretending to be who I wasn't, this sense that I could never fit in and that I was going to fail. On my very first day teaching a real class, I was very self-conscious of my accent, which was very different. I was very self-conscious of my pronunciation. I was very self-conscious of all of the other techniques, the new techniques I was learning that I had no clue. Things like how to elicit answers from students, how to speak less so that the students can speak more, because that's the point of language, right? That's the point of language learning, that you're able to express yourself and communicate fluently. And if the teacher is doing most of the speaking, then what time does the student have to actually practice, right? So I just felt like, how am I going to pull this off? Classroom management, how am I going to pull this off? I'm going to be standing in front of strangers, adults, strangers for that matter, not kids. I have to learn lots of nuances and cultures. I have to learn about the language to use in certain circumstances. I have to learn language that is very specific to specific professions and jobs. And it was so overwhelming. But in my mindset, this is mindset I've always carried. And that is that anything worth doing is worth doing well. And trying and failing doesn't mean that I am a complete failure. But it didn't stop me from feeling like an imposter. So, of course, my first day of class, I was nervous as hell. And so many thoughts were flying through my mind. Like, what would they think of me? How would they judge me? The first moment I stepped into the classroom, all eyes on me. A few people greeted me and asked me, is this your first day? Because I wasn't even teaching a new class. I was teaching a class that already existed, had already been going on for a few weeks. So they just assumed I was a new student. And then when they saw me stand in front of the classroom, you could see those curious stares and those curious looks. And I had no clue what they were thinking. And I thought to myself, is this really what you want to do? Do you think that you could really do this? Are you in the right place? You know, I was full of nerves. I was so jittery. I didn't know what to do. So I had to call upon my training, of course. And one of the most important things that you have to do as a teacher, a language teacher, not just of English, is you have to put your students at ease and build a rapport with them right from the start. And that's what I did. So I just spoke to them. Thankfully, they were not a beginner class. They were already intermediate. So my very first, thank God, class was an intermediate class. And that's a B2. So they already had a certain level, a certain command of English language. And so I was able to just get to know them and, you know, have a discussion and let them see me as a person, not as a teacher. And that was the moment I realized that I can't control how people see me. I can't control what people think of me, but I can shift the narrative that they have of me, but how I act, how I behave, the aura that I exude. So am I closing myself off? Am I shrinking and making them see that I'm incompetent, or making them feel like I'm unsure, like I don't know what I'm doing, like I'm insecure? Or am I opening up and inviting? Am I inviting curiosity? Am I inviting interest in not just what I'm about to teach, but in who I am, you know? And it was a glorious first 20 minutes. I have to admit that I spoke more than I should have, but that was the nerves. Now I know that I don't have to do it that hard, okay? Because of course, over the years, I've been teaching now for 10 years. Oh my God, I can't believe this. It's been 10 years that I've been doing this job that I never thought I would, you know, find myself doing, but I find myself loving it. When I love something, I dig deep, I dig in deep. So I, furthered my career. I did more professional courses. I got myself to a point of really solid confidence. And all of this process leads to a solidification of what is called self-concept clarity. This is the extent to which beliefs are clearly defined, internally consistent, and momentarily stable. It influences your self-esteem, decision-making, and emotional stability. And this is something that you build over time. And this job helped me build it. It helped me solidify who I am. It helped me build up a confidence in my heritage, my background, my color, my sex, that I don't have to shrink and hide, that I don't have to pretend to be who I'm not, just so that other people can feel comfortable. You know, I give you an example. So sometimes when I get into the classroom and I start teaching, there are people who can't control themselves and they will blurt out questions in the middle of an explanation. So I get questions. These are common questions I get. Where are you from? Where did you learn English? This one's funny. Do you have lions? I kid you not. Do you have a certain, you know, is it a lions or elephants? I've had those questions. That's crazy. But I learned to stop being defensive. I learned to stop avoiding those questions. And I just learned that people sometimes are just either ignorant or just curious because they really do not know. Because we get students from all over the world. We get students from Russia. We used to get a lot more from Russia. Now they're way less, but we get students from Russia. We get students from Japan, South Korea, even Canada, some Southeast Asia. We get students from everywhere, you know, French, Italian. And so it really does depend on what region they're from. The kind of questions I get really does depend. So I would get questions about animals, mostly from people from like Russia, Uzbekistan, you know, places like that. And questions of where you're from, where did you learn English, more from Europeans and professionals, so doctors, professors in universities, because they already have a certain perspective of Africans, Nigerians in particular, not just from the media, but also from the Nigerians they would meet, because we are numerous, as you know, and we are also kind of like ants. We go everywhere. You can find us everywhere. And so there are people don't know much about African culture, much about Nigerian culture for that matter. They only know what they see online, and they don't know that we have different backgrounds, we have different tribes, we have so many languages. We've got over 200 languages and more than 1,000 dialects, and each language with its own grammatical function and phonetics as well. And so there's also that pronunciation difference as well. So even in Nigeria, the way an Igbo man would articulate his English would sound different from the way a Yoruba, an Ishekiri, a Ijaw, a Hausa man would. So the pronunciation is just always different. The accent is and intonation are different. And then if you grow up in a big city like I did, your diction would also sound, I don't want to say cleaner, but depends where you schooled, of course, but it would not sound as thick as it would people who didn't grow up in these big cities. At first, I was very defensive, and I would sometimes try to avoid the question, or I would sometimes try to deflect the question, like, oh, where are you from? Or, you know, but then over time, I learned to use this as a teaching opportunity, not just to teach the language, but also to teach what is missing in their worldview. So I would tell them about Nigeria, I would tell them about my food. So this was a way to build a rapport with my students. So it's not just that I'm teaching them, but I'm able to build up the interest in the language itself, because they're utilizing the language, right? So I would say, let's say, for example, today the topic is food. And everyone had to talk about their local dish. I would also bring in my local dish. This builds up a lot of curiosity because they've never seen these ingredients before, and they ask lots of questions in English. You know, so I used myself as a tool to draw out the language. And the more I did that, the less I shrunk. But not only the less did I shrink, but also the more my confidence grew in who I really was, the more my self-concept solidified. Initially, I used to think that saying that I am from Nigeria would invoke a certain kind of discrimination. But now, when I say I'm from Nigeria, I say it proudly, because then people are taken aback and like, you're from Nigeria? Really? You don't sound Nigerian. Like, then I ask them, what does that Nigerian sound like? I don't know. I met a Nigerian and they sounded, you know, the accent was very thick and blah, blah, blah. Or you don't look Nigerian. I'm like, what does Nigerian look like? And it's an opportunity for me to express, you know, that we are various and we are unique and we are also human, you know, and we can do amazing things just like anybody else, and we can excel just like anybody else. And Africa is not just all about poverty and dance and big butts. Yeah, Africa also has people who are highly educated. Africa also has people who are very confident in who they are. And even though it put me in a vulnerable spotlight, in a vulnerable spot, It was a way to test my courage, my bravery. It was a way for me to say yes and stand firmly in who I was and stop trying to imitate others and just be fearless. And that's also what led me to starting this channel, because I also did think about starting a YouTube channel when I was in Nigeria, and I just thought I couldn't. I was like, no, this is not made for me. I'm not a good speaker, because trust me, when I'm in the classroom, my English is way more sophisticated than when I'm in front of the camera. I have no clue why, but I'm going to keep doing this and hope that I improve with each video. So if you're going through any moment right now, self-doubt, or just feeling like you're winging it, or feeling like you're an imposter, here's my message to you. Shrinking yourself only truly serves one purpose, and that is it diminishes your voice while uplifting that of others. It might be protective in the short run, but in the long run, is it really worth the price? Is it really worth the price of sacrificing your self-concept, your self-identity, just so that you can make other people feel better? So I challenge you today, stop shrinking and start embracing who you really are. It might not be through a job. It might be through art. It might be through a hobby. But whatever it is, you have to find moments in your life where you can truly stand firm in who you are and stop winging it. Because yes, some things in life are out of our control, and some things in life we have to conform, but not everything. So wherever you can shine, please do so. Until the next video, guys, have a wonderful day. My name is Isabella, and ciao, ciao.